All right. Hello, hello. This is Mr. Ling, and welcome to the future where I don't even have to show up at school. So, we're continuing Unit 4 macro measurements. Today, we're going to be talking about the business cycle and unemployment. And tonight, of course, you have no homework because I wouldn't be very fair at all. I don't come to school and give you homework. That's not nice. So, we will pick up with our formative assessment tomorrow. All right, here we go. So we're going to start by talking about the business cycle. Remember, we've already talked about GDP, various GDP measurements and growth, and what it means for our economy and how to calculate those things using the income approach and the expenditure approach. Now we're going to talk very generally about what happens with our economy. So this is a very general and probably pretty easy concept to understand. At least I'm hoping it's easy. Normally I hand draw this and we go through it together, but obviously, I can't do that today, so I'm just going to guide you through with a cursor and hope it works. All right, so this is the business cycle right here. Over here, we have time, as I'm circling here. Time is on our x-axis, and level of real output or real GDP is on our y-axis. And what we see happening is over time, our economy has this cycle that it tends to go through. So at the beginning, things are going pretty well, right? We have economic growth, there's more jobs, people are feeling comfortable, they're getting better income, so they buy more stuff. They buy more stuff, that goes into the businesses, they expand, they produce more goods and services, up and up and up. And then up here at the top, somebody says, wait a minute, this feels like a bubble. Things shouldn't be going this well. Unemployment shouldn't be this low, right? And suddenly, as if it were a self-fulfilling prophecy, the bubble bursts. People say, yeah, actually, we are overvaluing these things. And normally it starts with the news. Somebody makes a report and people get scared. People get nervous and they stop buying things. When they stop buying things, businesses lose profit. And when businesses lose profit, unemployment rises. When unemployment goes up, people get more scared. And as people get more scared, they get more worried. And as they get more worried, they buy fewer things and businesses lose more profit. And they lay even more people off, and down and down and down it goes until we get to the bottom. At the bottom, we have a trough, right? That is where we have high unemployment and a stagnant price level. At the very bottom, very high unemployment, things are bad. This is a full-blown recession right here. And then while we're at the bottom, somebody says, hey, it can't get any worse than this. I feel like we're at the bottom. And people start giving out positive reports. It seems like confidence is building again. And we as a people start to buy more goods and services. When we do that, businesses get more profits. Eventually they start hiring and they expand and they expand and they expand until we get to the peak, which is that temporary maximum where we have lowest unemployment. We're at full efficiency, but we do have rising prices. And at the peak, somebody else says, hey, seems like we have another bubble on our hands. And we start to worry again. People stop spending money and we fall into a recession. And this whole downward trend is a recession all the way down until we hit rock bottom again, maximum unemployment, really bad. And then somebody says, hey, things are going to start recovering. And like a self-fulfilling prophecy, they do. And we expand and expand and expand again. We hit another peak and on and on and on it goes. So this is the business cycle. Whenever it's going up, it's an expansion. When it's at the top, we are peaking. Then we go down to a recession after the peak. When it's at the bottom, we're in a trough. And then we're expanding, peak, recession, trough, expansion, peak, recession, trough, and on and on. Once you notice something else, even though we have this volatility, right, on this cycle, we are noticing an upward trend over time of GDP. That's symbolized by this blue line, right? Even though it's going up and going down, we're still gradually over time increasing overall GDP. That is our economic growth over time. So even though we have these recessions, troughs, and expansions and peaks, things over time generally are going well for our economy. All right, so that is the business cycle. Be able to label the expansions, the peaks, the recessions, and the troughs, and know that over time we have gradual economic growth. Now, there are some critics of this. They say, hey, look, it's not a cycle. It's more like business fluctuation. Cycle makes it seem inevitable and predictable. But in fact, it isn't. This is a more accurate version of economic growth over time. And you can see here we have troughs. Sometimes the troughs are very large. like in 1990. Sometimes the peaks are pretty high, right? And then look over here at 2008. This is for the UK. Look at that trough, that huge recession and trough and expansion and peak. So they're saying, look, saying it's a business cycle is misleading because there are times when the peaks are bad, and times when the peaks are not bad at all. And there are times when the troughs are really, really bad, severe recessions, and times when the troughs aren't bad at all. So generally speaking, hey, we need to call these fluctuations instead of a cycle. So it's more of a semantics argument. Okay, well, why do we care? What's the cyclical impact? How does a recession impact our industries and household spending? We talked a little bit about this already, so this should be somewhat reviewed to you. The cyclical impact is different for different types of goods. Remember we said at the beginning when we were talking about consumption, durable goods are goods that last longer than 3 years. That's the general economic definition. So for durable goods, when we have a recession, we call that a cycle. When we have a cyclical impact, durable goods have high volatility, right? They're going to respond very quickly to that recession. In other words, when a recession starts to happen, people stop buying durable goods. And the reason for this is simple. You can put them off. I'm planning on buying appliances for my house, and a recession hits. I'm worried I'm going to lose my job. It's probably not a great idea for me to go out and spend $5,000 on appliances. Or I'm going to go buy a brand new car. Well, if I'm worried that I might not have a job next week, it's probably not a good idea to get a monthly payment of $400 a month so I can drive around my Mercedes. So durable goods, high impact. Services, it just depends. Some of them are highly impacted. For example, an interior designer might have a severe reduction in business. If you're a car salesman or you provide the service of realtor, you're going to see a downturn in your services because they're related to durable goods. However, other services like going to the doctor probably will not see much of an impact at all because medical conditions, while they do vary slightly according to recessions and peaks, generally speaking, there's a pretty steady amount of sick people. It's kind of sad. Non-durable goods are not really recession-proof, but they are recession-resistant. Right? Because with these non-durable goods that last less than 3 years, generally you have to have them. Right? For gasoline, you can't just not buy gas because then you won't be able to get from place to place. So even in a recession, that's going to be relatively stable. Same thing with groceries. You still have to buy groceries even though you're in a recession because at the end of the day, you still need to eat. So that's the cyclical impact on 3 different types of goods. Now let's look at our second major calculation. Remember, GDP, by far the most important. The second one that we measure and we talk about a lot is unemployment. And we know unemployment is going to start happening when we're in that recession zone on the business cycle, or when we're in the trough, it's going to be at its maximum. So let's talk about the calculations and the complexities, and then we'll end here for the day. First, we have to understand what the labor force is. Unemployment is a percentage of the labor force, not a percentage of the population. And the labor force has specific rules as to who is counted and who isn't counted. So first, let's start with who's counted. Or I'm sorry, who's not counted. It'd be helpful if I looked at the slide. Who's not counted? First, it's anybody under the age of 16 is not counted. And this might seem a little bit bizarre to you because there are people that are allowed to work at 15 and a half, but you're not counted until you are 16 years old as a part of the labor force. So children, not a part of it. If you're institutionalized, if you are in prison, even though you might be providing some labor by picking up trash or whatever, that is not considered productive work. You're not getting a wage for that. And so you are not counted. And then the final one, probably the more controversial one, is the demoralized unemployed. Those that feel that it's not even worthwhile to look for a job anymore. They're downtrodden. They lost their job. They don't have transferable skills, or for whatever reason, they just feel like the workforce is not for me anymore. They are not counted. And we'll talk more about that as a criticism of the unemployment measurement in a little bit. So those 3 categories, not a part of the labor force. Those that are a part of the labor force are first those that are able to work. They're not disabled to an extent that they are unable or incapacitated. So they're able. And they are actively seeking employment. That means they are either fully employed or actively seeking it. That is a very important word there. If they just stop seeking unemployment, they're considered discouraged workers or the demoralized unemployed, and they're not counted. So if they're actively seeking employment or are employed, they're counted as the labor force. And right now, our U.S. labor force participation rate, which is how they measure that, is a little over 50%. As you can see here, that trend goes up and then goes down over time. After 2008, we see this downward trend here. That's not because there are fewer people that want jobs. That's because there are more people that are discouraged, right? That have decided that they're demoralized, unemployed. They no longer are seeking a job because they just don't have the transferable skills to make it happen. They don't think it's going to be worth it, right? And so that's going to be a major criticism of this. So let's calculate unemployment. The unemployment rate looks like this. You take your unemployed, that is a quantifiable amount, and you divide it by your labor force. Remember, we're not dividing by population. We're dividing by our labor force. So you might have to make that calculation first. They might give you a couple of metrics and say, this is how many discouraged workers there are. These are how many are employed. And these are this is the number of people that are unemployed but seeking employment at this time. So remember, you might have to calculate labor force first. Once you get labor force, it's unemployed divided by labor force times 100 gets your unemployment rate. Okay? So pretty simple. Let's try one out. All right, here we go. So if the unemployment rate in the economy is 7.5%, the total population of the economy is 250 million. And the size of the civilian labor force is 180 million. The number of employed workers in this economy is. Okay, so I'll give you a second for this, and then we'll come back together and talk. All right, so let's talk about this. First, what are they asking? They're not asking for the unemployment rate. In fact, they already gave us the unemployment rate up here. They're asking for the number of employed. Now remember, our labor force is going to be made up of both our employed and our unemployed that are counted, that are currently actively seeking employment, right? Now this unemployment rate of 7.5%, that is counting the people that are actively seeking employment in our economy right now. It's counting them. So if we take that as a percentage of our labor force, we can figure out the unemployed. And then we subtract the unemployed from our labor force, we can figure out the employed. So let's take a look at it. First, notice they give me the total population. That will never matter for me unless they're asking me to figure out the labor force. So that is extra information, not needed. So I take my 7.5% and I multiply it as 100, so 0.075 to 180 million. That's going to give me the amount that are unemployed. And then I take that amount and I subtract it from my labor force because unemployed plus employed equals labor force. So 180 million, subtracting that amount is going to give you 166.5 million. That is the amount of people that are employed. This is an example of one of the more difficult questions you'll get. Oftentimes, you'll just be asked to calculate the unemployment rate, which is simply the unemployed divided by the labor force times 100. All right, now let's get to those criticisms we were talking about. Many politicians either love and champion the unemployment rate when it's in their favor, or they critique and say it's understated in the event that it hurts their reputation, the unemployment rate. So if unemployment is very, very high and I'm the one that's in office right now, I'm going to say things like, oh, this is a wonderful, or this is a terrible thing, right? Or if it's very, very low and I'm not in office right now, I'm going to say, hey, unemployment rate is actually understated. It's way worse than they say it's going to be. So just depending on whether it will help me, the unemployment rate makes me look good or makes me look bad depends on what kind of stance I'm going to take on it. Generally, that's what I've seen over time. So here are a couple of the criticisms. The first thing is part-time employees are currently employed. This is a huge criticism of our society right now, our unemployment rate right now, because the Democrats are saying, hey, look, the unemployment rates are very low, and they are. But there are many people that are working at jobs that they're not thrilled about. The Republicans have started calling them the underemployed. So they're not unemployed, but they're underemployed. They are qualified for better jobs, but they got a 10 hours a week job at McDonald's because they couldn't figure out anything else. Even if you're just working 10 hours a week and not making nearly enough money to take care of your household, you are considered employed. And the other one is if you're a discouraged worker, if you're a worker that is really upset and decides that the labor force just isn't for them anymore because they cannot find a job. They've been looking and looking and looking, and they've just resigned to the fact that they're unemployable in our economy. You're not counted. And so as a result, the unemployment rate looks a lot lower than maybe it actually is. Right? If we included discouraged laborers as a part of our labor force, then, or as a part of our unemployed, I'm sorry, as a part of our unemployed, then our unemployment rate is going to be much, much higher. And if we don't include part-time employees as employed, but rather unemployed or maybe partially unemployed, as some people have argued, right, giving them maybe half credit towards employment, then our unemployment rate is going to be much, much higher as well. So generally, it's a good idea to look at the percentage of discouraged laborers and part-time employees in our economy in order to decide whether or not an unemployment rate is actually accurate or not. Now, there are three different types of unemployment that you need to know, and this was in your video as well. The first is frictional unemployment. We call this search and wait unemployment. So you have the qualifications. There are employers that want to hire you, as demonstrated by this beautiful visual down here. The employers want you, right? But there's friction between jobs. You're deciding, okay, I've quit one job and I'm transitioning to a new career. Maybe you graduated from high school and you immediately started working as an auto mechanic, right? And as you were an auto mechanic, you got more and more certifications. Eventually, you got a degree as an engineer. Wow, incredible, right? Well, now I'm quitting my job as an auto mechanic and I'm looking for a job as an engineer. There are probably several positions because I'm desirable, because I am qualified, but I want to make sure I make the right decision. So I'm taking several interviews and trying to figure out the next step. So that time, that kind of lag time between when I'm available for a job and qualified for a job and when I actually get a job is called frictional unemployment. And economists actually like frictional unemployment. They say it's a sign of a very thriving, good economy because it's a sign that people like you and me are bettering ourselves. We're investing in our human capital and trying to do a little bit better every single day. So that's a good thing. If we have more frictional unemployment, it's positive because it means people like you and me are transitioning to more productive jobs in our economy. So that's frictional unemployment. The classic example is a student graduates from college, has a degree, is very hireable, but it takes a little bit of time for them to find a job. And that time, that lag time between when they graduate and when they get their first job is considered frictional unemployment. And it's positive or a positive thing for our economy, according to economists. Second one is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is a little more severe, right? This is when your skill set becomes obsolete because our economy is restructuring itself. So probably the best example of this is factory jobs, right? In our economy for a long time, we were built around production, right? And classical production in the form of working in a factory and producing lots and lots of goods for distribution. Now, when we opened up the borders and allowed for free trade, comparative advantage took those jobs elsewhere. There are nations that could produce those goods at a much lower opportunity cost than us. And as a result, those jobs became obsolete here in the United States, and they went to people overseas, right? Now, those people that had that skill set are now unemployed. And they're not frictionally unemployed, they're structurally unemployed. So a great sort of litmus test of whether or not somebody is structurally unemployed is, do they have to adopt new skills or acquire new skills and new training to find another job? If the answer is yes, then they're structurally unemployed, right? I used to have this skill set, but it's not hireable anymore. So I'm now structurally unemployed. We also know structural unemployment is happening when failing firms go under. If a firm goes under due to lack of keeping up with the times, our economy is restructuring. And so layoffs that are occurring because of that are considered structural unemployment. All right, so that's the idea, structural unemployment. Now, this is very, very severe for the people in it. This causes all kinds of suffering, right? My father was laid off. He was a factory worker. I experienced that suffering firsthand. We had a very, very difficult time as he was retraining to try and find another job. However, economists think that this is a good thing, right? In fact, they don't count this against us at all, because they say structural unemployment is our economy adapting to better meet the needs and wants of our people, or helping us better solve scarcity. We shouldn't be producing record players anymore. We should be transitioning over to highly skilled positions of app development and smartphone production. That's what we should be doing in our economy, right? So that shift leaves a lot of people behind, but those people will get retrained. The idea is they'll get retrained. They'll get new skills that apply to the modernized economy as we restructure. So eventually they will get jobs again. It's just going to take a little bit of time. So again, a very positive thing, but you're laid off because your skill set is obsolete. Finally, the bad, cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is unemployment that is caused by a recession, right? The idea is people stop spending. And when people stop spending, your business loses profit, and they have to lay people off in order to maintain profitability. That's the idea, cyclical unemployment. This, you are perfectly qualified. You have the skill set. You're a very productive worker. Your skill set's not obsolete at all. You're not transitioning between jobs. You are set and you love your job. That's the assumption, and you're good at it. And then because of a recession, simply because people are not spending money when they need to, demand falls. And when demand falls, businesses shrink production. When businesses shrink production, you lose your job. This is cyclical unemployment and is considered critical. In the event that we want our economy to thrive, we need to minimize cyclical unemployment. So whenever you hear people talk about the unemployment rate, a portion of that unemployment rate is frictional. A portion of it is structural, so it doesn't matter. But the critical piece of it is cyclical unemployment. And that's the part that's going to rise or inflate as we go down the downward trend of our business cycle into recession and eventually to a trough. So you should know we have something called full employment, or the natural rate of unemployment, NRU. The natural rate of unemployment is frictional unemployment plus structural unemployment is full employment. Generally, this is about 4 to 5% in the United States of America. Frictional plus structural equals full. So our full employment rate, or natural rate of unemployment, is 4 to 5%. This number is considered good. It's beneficial. We should have a natural rate of unemployment. We should have some people that aren't working, because our economy should constantly be restructuring. So structural unemployment here. And our economy should constantly have people investing in their human capital, which requires them to transition from a less productive to a more productive job. So frictional unemployment. If both of those things are happening in our economy, then we have a healthy 4 to 5% full unemployment level, or natural rate of unemployment. Sorry. There we go. Now, unemployment, let me go back real quick. In the event that you are given an unemployment number, maybe it's 10%, right? So 10% unemployment, and you're given the full employment level, which is 5%. So 10% unemployment, 5% is our natural rate of unemployment, or our full employment level. You'll be asked the question, what is your structural unemployment? Or I'm sorry, not structural. What is your frictional unemployment? No, I've done this twice now. Oh my goodness. Even on a microphone, I mess this up. What is your cyclical unemployment? Let me reset this. You have 10% unemployment. Your frictional plus structural unemployment, or your full employment level, is 5%. So 5% full employment, 10% unemployment. What is my cyclical unemployment? Cyclical unemployment is simply going to be unemployment rate minus our natural rate of unemployment, or minus our full employment rate, equals cyclical unemployment. And so the answer is, if 10% is unemployment rate, 5% is my full employment rate. The answer is 5%. That additional 5%, the difference between full employment and unemployment, is going to be our cyclical unemployment. And we'll do that more in class, because it's kind of confusing if I'm not writing it up on a whiteboard. Now, unemployment has several costs, which is why we pay close attention to it. First, there's an uneven burden in our population, right? Generally speaking, when unemployment hits, it hits the low-skilled workers the hardest. Those are the ones that are first to go. Generally speaking, it affects the men more than the women. Oftentimes, that's because men hold a larger percentage of those low-skilled jobs. So those two go hand in hand. Duration. In the event that you have long-term unemployment over a long period of time, there's going to be a small percentage that are going to have a very long time to find more employment. So duration is uneven. Teens are often lose their jobs more frequently, clearly because they line up with these other metrics. If you have low education, often you're more expendable, and so you'll lose your job more likely. And then, of course, and unfortunately, race has something to do with it as well, race and ethnicity. When unemployment rates are rising, it normally impacts them first. Now, there are some dangers with unemployment as well. The dangers of unemployment really are connected with idleness. There are a ton of studies, but when we have high levels of unemployment, not only is it an uneven burden on certain people in our economy, but also it has an impact on our overall fabric of our culture. First, family disintegration happens much more frequently. Divorce levels always rise in a recession. There are more acts of violence during that time. Political change, often as a result of high levels of unemployment. We witness that throughout our economy, right? Whenever the economy is doing poorly, people demand change. Loss of morale, people get upset. Depression sets in, which goes along with health. We see a higher level of health difficulties. People lose skills during this time, right? Especially those that are discouraged laborers lose skills. So we're losing productivity in our economy as people fail to work. And then when we have unemployment, we also have a higher level of ethnic tension in our economy, mainly because of that uneven burden, where those that are non-white tend to be more dramatically impacted than those that are white. All right, over time, more on the dangers of unemployment. Here's our crime rate per 100,000. That's the blue, which we've seen a nice downward trend there up to 2008. And then here is our unemployment rate. And so what you should be seeing is the unemployment rate is dragging up and down the crime rate, right? So as the unemployment rate goes down, we're doing well around the 2000s, it's pulling down the crime rate. And as unemployment goes up, it starts pulling up the crime rate and then pulling it down gradually. And then 2008, unemployment skyrocketed, and the rest of this graph shows that climbing once again. Okay, so a correlation between crime rate and unemployment rate. All right, we're going to end there. Our next and final portion of this unit is going to be talking about inflation. I hope you have a great day. Sorry I couldn't be there today, and I will see you again tomorrow, and we'll have a great time. All right, bye-bye.